It was supposed to be a normal summer afternoon, kids laughing, water splashing, and my autistic son finally feeling safe and happy in the pool. He was in his own world, doing what he always does to stay calm. Then, in less than 30 seconds, everything changed. An HOA Karen, the kind who lives to scream rules, stormed toward my child. She grabbed him without warning. I heard a scream so sharp it froze everyone in place. The water went silent. My son hit the ground, crying in pain. His arm was broken. Parents stood there in shock. Someone called the police. An ambulance arrived. What should have been a peaceful day turned into a nightmare we could never forget. We had witnesses. We had medical reports. We had the truth. But when the case finally went to court, the judge did something no one expected, and the entire trial was suddenly stopped. Before I tell you what really happened that day, let me ask you something important. Which city are you watching this video from right now? Drop your city name in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. And if you believe in standing up for children, especially those who can't always speak for themselves, please take 1 second to subscribe to this channel. Stories like this don't get told unless people support them. Now, let me take you back. My son is autistic. Loud noises overwhelm him. Sudden touches scare him. But water? Water is where he feels calm. The pool was his safe place, his routine, his therapy, his escape from a world that often doesn't understand him. That pool belonged to our community, controlled by the HOA. A place full of rules, signs, and people who love to enforce them, but rarely understood the people they were enforcing them on. That day, my son wasn't breaking any rules. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was quietly flapping his hands in the water, smiling, staying in his lane, just trying to exist. Then she appeared, a woman who saw rules before she saw a child. A woman who didn't ask questions. A woman who didn't listen when I tried to explain. What happened next wasn't just an incident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a moment that exposed how power, ignorance, and cruelty can collide, and how the system meant to protect us can suddenly turn silent. This isn't just my family's story. It's a warning. And now, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, step by step, no exaggeration, no filters, because the truth is more shocking than fiction. That morning started like any other summer day, the kind you don't remember because nothing special is supposed to happen. The sun was already high, the air thick with heat, and my son was pacing back and forth in the living room, gripping his pool goggles in his hands. That was his way of telling me he was ready. He didn't say, "Dad, can we go to the pool?" He rarely spoke in full sentences, but I knew. I always knew. My son is autistic. Routines are his anchor. If one small thing changes, his entire world can feel like it's collapsing. Saturdays meant the pool. Same time, same towel, same blue goggles, same corner chair where I sat and watched him from a distance, letting him feel independent but safe. That pool wasn't just water to him, it was therapy, it was peace. It was the one place where the noise in his head seemed to quiet down. We walked into the community pool area, just after noon. The smell of chlorine hit us immediately, mixed with sunscreen and hot concrete. Kids were laughing, parents were chatting, and everything felt normal, comfortably normal. I signed us in at the HOA desk, barely paying attention to the woman sitting there. She didn't look up. She never did. Clipboard, pen, bored expression, just another HOA volunteer enforcing rules she barely understood. My son eased himself into the water, gripping the metal railing the way he always did. One step at a time. Slow, careful. When he finally submerged, his shoulders relaxed. He smiled. That small smile, the one that only comes when he feels safe, made everything worth it. I sat in my usual chair, sunglasses on, watching him flap his hands gently under the water. To someone who didn't understand autism, it might look strange. To me, it meant he was calm. That's when I noticed her. She was standing near the NO running sign, arms crossed, scanning the pool like a hawk. Perfectly styled hair. Oversized sunglasses. A permanent scowl. The kind of person who looks for problems because she needs to feel important. At first, I ignored her. I wish I hadn't. She started pacing, watching kids too closely, shaking her head, muttering things under her breath. I saw her point at a teenage boy splashing too hard, then glare at a mother whose toddler was crying. Then her eyes locked onto my son. She leaned toward another HOA member and whispered something. They both looked at my child. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the one parents of special needs kids know too well, the feeling that someone is about to misunderstand everything. I stood up slightly, ready to intervene if needed. She walked toward the pool edge, heels clicking loudly against the concrete. "Hey," she shouted. My son didn't respond. He never does when strangers yell. Loud voices overwhelm him. He just kept moving his hands in the water, eyes focused downward. She frowned. I said, "HOA. No splashing like that." I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said calmly, keeping my voice even. "He's autistic. He's not splashing anyone. He's fine." She didn't look at me. Not once. "There are rules," she snapped. "This is a community pool." "I understand," I replied, "and he's following them." That's when she finally turned toward me. Slowly, deliberately, like she wanted everyone watching. "Well, sir, if your child can't follow the rules, maybe he shouldn't be here." The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, she turned back to my son. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. She leaned over the pool railing and reached for him. "Don't touch him." I shouted, but it was too late. She grabbed his arm. My son screamed. Not a normal cry, a terrified, panicked scream that echoed across the pool. His body stiffened. He tried to pull away, instincts kicking in, fear flooding him all at once. "Let go!" I yelled, running toward them. She yanked harder. There was a sound I will never forget. A sharp, sickening crack. My son collapsed into the shallow end, clutching his arm, screaming in pain. The water around him churned as people jumped up from their chairs. Someone gasped. Someone else screamed. "Oh my God!" I dropped to my knees at the pool's edge, pulling him toward me. His arm was bent at an angle no arm should ever bend. He was crying, rocking, repeating the same broken word over and over. "Hurt, hurt, hurt." I looked up at her. She was backing away. I didn't mean." He was resisting, she stammered. Resisting. Like he was a threat. Like he wasn't a child. Like he wasn't disabled. Someone called 911. Another parent recorded on their phone. The entire pool area had gone silent, except for my son's cries. The HOA Karen stood there, pale now, her authority evaporating in real time. But what I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that this moment was only the beginning. Because the real shock wasn't what happened at the pool. It was what happened after. And how quickly the system chose to protect her instead of my child. The sirens arrived before the shock had time to wear off. Red and blue lights bounced off the water, the metal fences, the windows of nearby houses. The sound alone sent my son into another spiral. He pressed his good arm against his ears, rocking back and forth, crying in a way that tore straight through my chest. "It's okay," I kept saying, even though nothing was okay. "Daddy's here. I've got you." The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. One of them knelt beside us and spoke softly, slow and gentle, like someone who understood children like my son. She didn't grab him. She didn't raise her voice. She waited for me to nod before she touched him. That small act of respect made me want to cry. They examined his arm carefully. The swelling was already bad. Deep purple bruising bloomed beneath his skin. When they tried to straighten it even slightly, he screamed again, louder than before. "Definite fracture," the paramedic said, looking up at me. "Possibly worse." I nodded, numb. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, I looked around and finally really saw the scene. Parents standing in clusters, whispering. Phones held up, recording. Kids pulled close to their mothers. And her, standing off to the side, arms wrapped around herself, talking rapidly to another HOA member. She wasn't crying. She wasn't apologizing. She was explaining. I caught pieces of it as the wind carried her voice toward me. He was out of control, He wouldn't listen. I was just trying to enforce the rules. The words made my hands shake. The police arrived moments later. 2 officers stepped through the gate, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the crowd. One of them approached me while the other went straight to her. "Sir, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," the first officer said. I did, calmly, clearly, from the moment she yelled to the moment my son's arm snapped. I told him my son was autistic. I told him I warned her not to touch him. I told him witnesses were everywhere. He listened. He nodded. He wrote everything down. Then he walked away to speak to her. I watched from the ambulance door as she gestured wildly, shaking her head, pointing back at the pool. Her face shifted into something I recognized instantly, a practiced expression of victimhood. The kind that says I'm the reasonable one here. When the officer returned, his tone had changed. "Sir," he said carefully, "she claims your son was splashing aggressively and refused multiple verbal warnings." "That's a lie." I snapped before I could stop myself. She never warned him. He didn't even understand her. "I understand you're upset," the officer replied, holding up a hand, "but we need to gather all statements." Another officer approached with a notepad. "Do you have documentation of your child's condition?" The question stunned me. Documentation? I repeated, "My child's arm is broken. Why does that matter?" "It helps establish context," he said, neutral but distant. "Context. Like my son needed paperwork to deserve protection." Before I could respond, a woman stepped forward. Then another. Then another. She grabbed him. One mother said firmly, "I saw everything," said a teenage lifeguard, voice shaking. "He wasn't doing anything wrong," someone else added. Phones were held up higher now. The balance in the air shifted slightly. The officer nodded and wrote more notes. But then the HOA president arrived. Middle-aged, confident, smiling too much. "What's going on here?" he asked, clapping his hands together lightly, like he was walking into a meeting instead of a crime scene. He pulled the officers aside, spoke in low tones, nodded gravely, glanced at me, then quickly away. I didn't hear what he said, but I saw the result. When the officers returned, they told me no arrest would be made at that time. At this time, I repeated, "She broke my child's arm." "This will be forwarded to the district attorney," one officer said. "You can pursue charges." Pursue charges. Like justice was an optional upgrade. The ambulance doors closed, cutting off the noise of the pool. As we drove away, my son stared at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into his ears. "Home," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "Hospital." At the ER, X-rays confirmed it, a clean but severe fracture. Surgery would be needed. Weeks of recovery. Months of therapy. The doctor looked at me over his glasses. "How did this happen?" I told him. His jaw tightened. That should never have happened. I thought so too. But the real punch came later that night. I got a call from the HOA. A calm, polite voice informed me that my family's pool privileges were suspended pending investigation due to unsafe behavior. I laughed, a broken, hollow laugh. "You're suspending us?" I said, "Sir, please remain professional," the voice replied. "We're simply following procedure." Procedure. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about one woman losing control. This was about power, and they were already using it. What I didn't know yet was that this was only the first lie, and that much bigger ones were already being prepared. And when the case finally reached court, those lies would nearly win. The days after the surgery blurred together into a haze of hospital hallways, pain medication schedules, and sleepless nights. My son's arm was wrapped in layers of bandages and a hard cast that seemed far too big for his small body. He hated it, the weight, the texture, the way it changed everything about how he moved. Every few hours he'd wake up crying, confused, asking the same question again and again. "Why, lady hurt me?" There was no answer gentle enough. While he struggled to heal, I started making calls. I contacted the police department first, asking about charges. I was told the report had been submitted for review. When I pressed for details, the response was vague. These things take time. Time was something my son didn't have, Every day without therapy meant setbacks. Every delay meant more fear, more anxiety, more regression. So I hired a lawyer. She was sharp, direct, and didn't sugarcoat anything. After reviewing the police report, she looked up at me and frowned. "This report minimizes what happened," she said. "What do you mean?" "They're framing it as an attempt to restrain rather than an assault." I felt my chest tighten. She grabbed him. She broke his arm. "I know," she replied, "but the language matters. And right now, the language favors her." That's when she told me something that made my stomach drop. The HOA Karen had already hired legal representation. And not just any lawyer, someone with deep connections in the county. Worse, the HOA itself was backing her. They issued a formal statement claiming the incident was an unfortunate accident during rule enforcement and suggested my son's injury resulted from unexpected movement. Unexpected movement, like a broken arm, just happens. My lawyer shook her head. "They're building a narrative," she said, "and they're moving fast." A week later, we got the official notice. Charges were being filed, but not the ones I expected. Not felony assault. Not child endangerment. Misdemeanor reckless conduct. It felt like a slap in the face. "She broke his arm," I said, my voice shaking. "How is that a misdemeanor?" My lawyer leaned back. "Because they're arguing she had authority as an HOA representative, that she was acting within her role. HOA representatives don't get to put their hands on kids." "You're right," she said quietly, "but that's not how they're framing it." As if that wasn't enough, the HOA sent us another letter. This one accused me of negligence. They claimed I failed to adequately supervise my child, that my presence somehow contributed to the incident. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. "They're blaming the parent," I whispered. My lawyer nodded. Classic move. But then, something unexpected happened. The videos started coming in. At first, it was one clip. A parent who had been standing near the shallow and sent us a shaky recording taken on her phone. It clearly showed the woman yelling, then reaching into the pool. Then another video surfaced, from a different angle. Clearer. Louder. You could hear me yelling, "Don't touch him." You could hear my son screaming. And then the sound. That crack. I had to turn it off halfway through. My lawyer watched the rest, stone-faced. "This changes things," she said. More videos followed. A lifeguard's body cam footage. Security footage from a nearby building that captured the aftermath. My son on the ground, her backing away, witnesses rushing in. And then there was the email. An anonymous HOA board member forwarded it to me late one night. No name. No explanation. Just a subject line that read, "You should see this." The email was from her. Sent the same evening as the incident. Addressed to the HOA president. In it, she wrote, "The child was noncompliant and aggressive. I used reasonable force to maintain order. If there are questions, we should present a unified explanation." Unified explanation. Not the truth. An explanation. My lawyer read it twice, then looked up slowly. "This," she said, "is intent." We forwarded everything to the district attorney. Suddenly, the tone changed. Calls were returned faster. Meetings were scheduled. The misdemeanor charge was reconsidered. The possibility of additional charges was under review. That's when the pressure started. I got calls from unknown numbers. Messages left with careful wording. "This is getting bigger than it needs to be. Think about your family. Court can be stressful for a child like yours." One message crossed a line. A man claiming to represent the HOA suggested a settlement, medical bills covered, legal fees reimbursed, and a confidentiality agreement. They wanted silence. I looked at my son, struggling to stack blocks with one hand, frustration written all over his face. "No," I said. The trial date was set. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Colder. Sterile. My son didn't attend. My lawyer advised against it. She said seeing him could complicate things. I hated that. The prosecution laid out the evidence. Videos, medical records, witness statements, the email. Her defense argued she was acting in good faith, that my son's movements were unpredictable, that she feared for safety. Fear of a child in the shallow end. Then came her testimony. She cried, softly, carefully. She spoke about being overwhelmed and trying to do her job, and then, just as the tension peaked, just as the judge leaned forward, something happened that no one in the room was prepared for. The judge raised a hand. "Stop," he said. The courtroom froze, and with a single sentence, he brought the entire trial to a halt. The judge's hand was still raised in the air. No one moved. Not the prosecutor. Not the defense attorney. Not even the court clerk, whose fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen mid-note. The room, which moments earlier had been buzzing with tension, fell into a silence so deep I could hear my own breathing. "Stop," the judge repeated, his voice calm but firm. He leaned back in his chair and removed his glasses slowly, deliberately, like a man who had just realized something was very wrong. "I'm going to pause this proceeding," he said. The defense attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor." I said, "Pause." The judge replied, sharper now, "Sit down." She did. The judge turned his attention to the prosecution. "Counsel, how long has the court been aware of the existence of video evidence showing the defendant initiating physical contact with a minor?" The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the videos were submitted during discovery." "Answer the question," the judge interrupted. "When did you personally see them?" There was a hesitation. Just a second too long. 2 weeks ago, the prosecutor admitted. The judge's jaw tightened. "And when did this case first come before this court?" 6 months ago, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge nodded slowly, then turned toward the defense. "Counsel," he said, "your client testified moments ago that she never forcefully grabbed the child, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," the defense attorney replied confidently. She stated she only attempted verbal redirection. The judge picked up a remote from his desk. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen behind him flickered to life. Video footage filled the room. Clear, unedited, unavoidable. It showed her leaning over the pool railing, reaching down, grabbing my son's arm, yanking. The sound echoed through the courtroom. That crack. I heard someone gasp behind me. The judge paused the video at the exact moment her hand closed around my child's arm. "This," he said quietly, "is physical contact." He turned back toward the attorneys. "And yet," he continued, "this court is being asked to evaluate this incident as a misdemeanor act of reckless conduct, while substantial evidence suggests potential felony assault on a disabled minor." The room exploded into whispers. The defense attorney jumped to her feet. "Your Honor, with respect." "Enough," the judge snapped. He looked down at the case file in front of him, flipping through pages rapidly now, his expression darkening with every turn. "I am seeing repeated delays," he said. "I am seeing downgraded charges without clear justification. And I am seeing evidence that was not adequately addressed at earlier hearings." He looked directly at the district attorney. "Do you know what this looks like?" The prosecutor swallowed. "No, Your Honor." "It looks like selective prosecution," the judge said, "and that is a serious concern." My heart began to pound. The judge leaned forward, resting both hands on the bench. "This court will not proceed until several matters are addressed." He began listing them one by one. "First, I am ordering an immediate review by the district attorney's office regarding charging decisions in this case. Second, I am referring the handling of evidence to an independent oversight committee. Third, I am placing this trial on temporary suspension, effective immediately." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Suspension. The defense attorney looked stunned. The prosecutor looked panicked. "What does that mean?" someone whispered behind me. The judge wasn't finished. "I am also instructing both parties to preserve all communications related to this case," he added, "including emails, internal messages, and correspondence involving the HOA. My lawyer leaned toward me, her eyes wide. "He suspects interference," she whispered. The judge turned his gaze toward the defendant. She was pale now. Her confident posture had collapsed. Her hands trembled in her lap. "This court takes allegations involving harm to children, especially disabled children, extremely seriously," the judge said. and I will not allow this proceeding to continue under a cloud of impropriety." He struck the gavel. "This court is in recess." Just like that, it was over. People stood in stunned silence as the judge exited through the side door. Reporters rushed out, phones already in hand. Attorneys huddled in urgent whispers. I stayed seated. My legs wouldn't move. For months, I had prepared myself for a verdict: guilty or not guilty, justice or disappointment. I had not prepared for this. Outside the courtroom, microphones were already being set up. A reporter approached me, asking for a statement. I shook my head and kept walking. That night, my phone didn't stop ringing. News outlets, advocacy groups, lawyers I'd never heard of, parents of autistic children thanking me for standing up. But the most chilling call came late. From my lawyer. "They found something," she said. "What?" I asked. "The Oversight Committee pulled internal emails from the DA's office," she replied. "There were discussions about avoiding negative publicity because of the HOA's influence." I felt sick. "So they tried to bury it." I said. "Yes," she answered, "and the judge knows it." The next morning, the story broke. Judge Halt's trial amid concerns of misconduct in HOA pool assault case. The HOA released a statement denying wrongdoing. But behind the scenes, everything was unraveling. Subpoenas were issued. Witnesses were recalled. New charges were being considered, not just against her, but against those who helped protect her. And for the first time since that day at the pool, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Because the trial wasn't stopped to protect her. It was stopped because the truth was finally too big to ignore. And what came next would shock everyone involved. The fallout didn't come quietly. It came like a wave. Within 48 hours of the judge halting the trial, the case was everywhere. Morning news, evening panels, social media threads filled with outrage and disbelief. The video, blurred but unmistakable, played on screens across the country. Comment sections exploded with the same sentence over and over again. How did this ever get this far? The HOA issued another statement. This one was longer, more carefully worded. It talked about regret, miscommunication, and ongoing internal review. What it did not include was an apology to my son. Not his name, not his injury, not the trauma. Behind the scenes, the tone was very different. Subpoenas landed like bombs. The district attorney's office was ordered to turn over internal emails, text messages, and call logs connected to the case. The HOA board members were summoned one by one. So were the responding officers. So was the HOA Karen's attorney. And then the charges changed. The misdemeanor was officially dropped. In its place, felony assault on a disabled minor. When my lawyer called to tell me, I had to sit down. "They're also reviewing obstruction," she added, "for anyone who interfered with evidence or influenced charging decisions." That list was getting longer by the hour. The woman who had broken my son's arm was suddenly no longer smiling for cameras. Paparazzi caught her leaving her house in sunglasses and a hoodie, head down, avoiding eye contact. Her lawyer stopped returning calls. And then something unexpected happened. She broke. Not in court. Not publicly. Privately. Her attorney reached out to mine. "They want to talk," my lawyer said. I felt my chest tighten. "About what?" "A plea," she replied, "and a statement." I said nothing for a long time. "Do you want to hear it?" she asked. "Yes," I finally said. "I want to hear everything." The meeting was held in a quiet conference room. No cameras. No reporters. Just lawyers and her. She looked different. Smaller. Older. The confidence was gone, replaced by something brittle and frantic. When she saw me, her eyes dropped immediately. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she said, her voice shaking. I didn't respond. She swallowed hard. "They told me it would be fine. The HOA. They said they'd handle it." That was the moment. The moment the truth slipped out. "Handle what?" my lawyer asked calmly. She hesitated. "The charges," she whispered. "The story." The room went silent. "They told me to stick to the same explanation," she continued. "That he was aggressive. That I was scared. They said it would protect everyone." "Did they tell you to lie?" my lawyer asked. She closed her eyes. "Yes." That single word changed everything. She signed an affidavit that day. In it, she admitted to grabbing my son, admitted to exaggerating his behavior, admitted that HOA leadership coached her narrative and reassured her she wouldn't face serious consequences. In exchange, her lawyer hoped for leniency. But the damage was done. The affidavit went straight to the judge. Within days, new investigations were announced, not just into the HOA, but into how the case had been handled from the start. One of the responding officers was placed on administrative leave. A senior staff member in the DA's office quietly resigned. The story stopped being about one woman. It became about a system that protected power instead of children. Advocacy groups stepped in. Autism organizations issued statements demanding reform. Civil rights attorneys offered support. Lawmakers began asking questions. And my son? He was slowly healing. Physical therapy was hard, painful, confusing. Some days he refused to cooperate, overwhelmed by the sensations, the exercises, the noise. Other days, he surprised everyone, lifting his arm a little higher, holding a toy a little longer. One evening, as I helped him with his exercises, he looked at me and asked a question that broke my heart. "Pool bad," he said softly. I knelt in front of him. "No," I replied. "What happened was bad, not the pool." He thought for a moment. "Lady Bad?" he asked. I paused. "She made a bad choice," I said carefully, "and now she has to face it." He nodded, accepting the answer in the simple, honest way only a child can. The next court date was set. This time, the courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and reporters, but with parents, advocates, people who saw their own children in my son. The judge entered, expression grave. "This court reconvenes under new circumstances," he said. He acknowledged the affidavit, the investigations, the expanded charges. "This case," he continued, "now represents more than an individual act. It represents a failure of oversight, accountability, and integrity." I felt a lump in my throat. For months, I had felt alone, powerless. Now, the room felt different. The judge set a path forward, new hearings, new defendants, a timeline for accountability. He made one thing very clear. This court will not allow influence or status to override justice. As the gavel struck, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, it felt fair. And what happened next, the final outcome, the consequences, the lesson, would leave a mark far beyond our community. The final hearing didn't feel like the movies. There was no dramatic music, no shouting, no sudden confessions, just a courtroom heavy with truth. My son didn't come. This time, that decision felt right. He had already carried enough of the story on his small shoulders. He was at home, working through his therapy session, stacking blocks, trying slowly to trust the world again. I sat in the front row, hands folded so tightly my knuckles ached. The judge entered. Everyone stood. He looked older than before, tired, like a man who had seen too much of how systems fail the people they're meant to protect. "We are here today," he began, "to conclude proceedings in a case that has revealed serious wrongdoing, both individual and institutional." He didn't look at the defendant first. He looked at the room, at the parents, at the advocates, at the people who showed up because this story felt personal. The charges were read aloud. Felony assault on a disabled minor, conspiracy to obstruct justice, official misconduct, not just against her, against others. The HOA Karen sat rigid, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. Gone was the authority. Gone was the confidence. She looked like someone finally realizing that power has limits. Her lawyer spoke briefly, asking for leniency. He cited stress, poor judgment, an isolated incident. The judge listened, then shook his head. "This was not isolated," he said. "It was enabled." He turned to her. "You chose to put your hands on a child," he said calmly. "A child who could not defend himself. A child whose disability you either ignored or dismissed." She began to cry. The judge didn't raise his voice. "And when the harm was done," he continued, "you chose not honesty but protection, not accountability but influence." He paused. "Those choices matter." The sentence followed. Prison time reduced but real. Probation with strict conditions. Mandatory restitution for medical costs and therapy. A permanent ban from any position of authority involving children. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the HOA. Civil penalties. Mandatory restructuring. Loss of authority over community recreational spaces. Oversight by an external compliance board. The judge looked directly at the HOA representatives. Community power does not place you above the law, he said. It increases your responsibility under it. And finally, he addressed the system itself. This court has referred multiple findings to state oversight bodies, he said. Further action is pending. That was as much as he could say. But it was enough. The gavel struck. It is so ordered. Just like that, it was over. I didn't feel relief right away. I felt quiet. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. Do you feel justice was served? What message does this send? What would you say to other parents? I stepped forward once. This was never about revenge. I said it was about responsibility, about listening to children who don't always have a voice. Then I left. At home that evening, my son was sitting on the floor, lining up his toy cars. He looked up when I walked in. Court done? He asked. Yes, I said softly. Court is done. He considered that for a moment. No more lady, he asked. No, I replied. No more lady. He smiled, just a little. Later that night, as I watched him sleep, cast gone, arm healing, I realized something important. This story wasn't just about what happened to us. It was about what almost didn't happen. How close the system came to protecting power instead of truth. How easily a lie could have erased a child's pain. How many other stories never make it this far, if not for witnesses, if not for evidence, if not for one judge willing to stop everything and ask, why? This case changed policies. It changed oversight. It changed lives. But most importantly, it reminded people of something simple and essential. Rules do not matter more than humanity. Authority does not excuse harm. And children, especially disabled children, are not problems to be controlled. They are people to be protected. If this story moved you, even a little, don't scroll away. Backhand index pointing right comment below. Which city are you watching from? Let your voice be seen. Backhand index pointing right share this video, so stories like this can't be buried in silence. Backhand index pointing right subscribe to this channel if you believe accountability matters more than influence. And most importantly, if you ever see injustice happening in real time, don't look away. Because sometimes your voice is the difference between a cover-up and a child finally getting justice.